Welcome to UNT World's Bridging Gaps podcast, hosted by University of North Texas System Chancellor Lisa Rowe and Chief Communications Officer Paul Corliss. This monthly podcast spotlights innovators and leaders from the University of North Texas System and its member institutions, the University of North Texas, UNT Dallas, and the UNT Health Science Center. With our heart in North Texas, we transform lives and create economic opportunity.
Welcome to the Bridging Gaps podcast here in downtown Dallas. I am Paul Corliss, the Chief Communications Officer for the University of North Texas System. With me, as always, is our Chancellor, Lisa Rowe. We're coming off of a board meeting and a Memorial Day weekend, and I think you had a wedding to go to. What's going on, Lisa?
Yeah, lots of things. Hey, we're also coming off of the 86th Texas legislature.
Ooh, yes, we are.
Yeah, and it was a good session, and we really owe deep appreciation to the legislators that really were committed to higher education. Even though that, certainly it was going to be a focus on education, but we saw nice increases in focus on higher ed as well. So we were very thankful for that. And,
well, you've done that for years at the federal level when you were with NASA, but how was it working with legislators as part of this funding process at the state level here in Texas?
I think it's, very similar, except that, federal, you're doing it annually. Here it's, it's every 2 years. So it's, but I think similar processes, that you go through to make that happen. So,
yeah. Also nice to have our board chairman helping us pull the rope a little bit.
It really was. Our board chair really did a heavy lift, and we're very thankful for that.
Of course, we're talking Brent Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. And we're really pleased with all the support that our whole board has been giving us, in going to graduation. So we just recently graduated we graduated a record number of students. So we're pretty excited about that. And our board folks, our board regents were right there and supporting all of that. So that was a lot of fun.
And then you put them to work the next week at the Board of Regents
meeting. At the actual
meeting.
Board meeting, right? And that went well too. We did our usual, briefed our strategy, talked about where we're headed, but we had some kind of really exciting things with unveiling our Frisco plan.
Absolutely.
And I think we'll get into some of that. I'll bet we'll get into that today. So that's pretty exciting. And we got to recognize the generosity of the Lovelace and McNatt families in donating to our UNT football practice facility.
Big, bad indoor facility. That's a game changer.
It is a game changer. So lots of exciting things going on. And
you know what I like, Lisa, if I may interrupt since we're talking board, is I thought that the Quality Enhancement Program, the QEP, which sounds maybe boring, but I thought it was so cool that UNT Health Science Center is working on the mental health and the well-being of physicians in training, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's awesome as well. And that was another thing our board really jumped on, because that's what's happening in their companies as well, where we really need to be focused on that. Not just, typically people focus on more health and physical well-being, but this is also financial well-being, and it's really the whole person. So I was pretty excited to see some of that, not only for students, which is, of course, the QEP is focused around that, but also around employees.
Right.
So very good.
Michael Williams does so many neat and innovative things over in Fort Worth. At UNT Dallas, we went by the new building. The new student center was dedicated. I think it's about a $64 million facility. Talk about what you thought of that when you were part of that event.
So impressive, really forward-leaning. You can see what a difference that's going to make for our UNT Dallas campus. It's really centering student activities right there. So students will be able to be they'll have advisement there. They'll be able to it's kind of a one-stop shop. But not only that, the space is really, like I said, it's very modern and very forward-leaning, and something that all of our future students are just going to come in and they're going to say, I want to go here.
Yeah, it makes it feel so much more like a college campus. I know it's growing, and to have now 4 or 5 buildings in place really changes the feel of things.
Yeah, it does. We actually did a graduation there for our graduate level as well, so that was pretty cool, and just fun stuff happening.
Well, let's segue into our special guests today, and it's a perfect segue because we're talking about building a campus, and we're actually just beginning to build a campus up in Frisco in Collin County, which is really one of the most amazing economic stories in the country, going from sort of a farm outpost to this booming growth economy that we're taking advantage of, and trying to bring new offerings to the business community as well as to the community at large from an education standpoint. And you and I took a visit out there and got to, I think it was too wet for us to actually stand on the property, but we got to the side of the road and looked at it. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful land, probably the highest point in Frisco, right in the hub of things. We're going to have the PGA right next door. It's pretty incredible. It's incredibly exciting.
So. Well, what was incredible to me when we went out there was that we got to spend time with these two guys that are here across the table from us today. And Dr. Wesley Randall is the dean at UNT at Frisco, and Dr. Alan Clark is associate vice president for information services at UNT. And Alan Clark, you actually conceived Frisco to a degree, UNT at Frisco, in an academic paper. Is that right? Give us the rundown on how this kind of came about.
I came from industry and had the opportunity to get my doctorate in higher education. So that's the study of how education works. And to be able to see Frisco in a light that so much industry was coming in, and to be able to say, okay, they have a very special educational need. And with that, we just fell in love with the idea of a regional campus there, and wrote a paper about how we would get started and what the facility looked like, and got to be able to do the design for Hall Park, where we're at, and just be able to continue that work now with the new campus has been very exciting.
Oh, it's got to be an amazing thing to see something that was in your head actually come to life, and the guy helping you bring it to life is over here with us as well, and that's Dr. Wesley Randall. Wesley, you're the dean at UNT Frisco. You've been doing that for about a year or so now?
So started that about a year ago, where we kind of put together a little team to figure out what does the future look like, what are we organizing around, what's a new type of curriculum, and what's a new type of engagement with our community and industry partners look like, and it hasn't slowed down.
Well, and before I let Lisa jump in with some questions for you, just give us a little bit on your background, because it's unique. I got to sit next to you on the bus when we took a tour of Frisco the other day and got to know you a little bit and learned about your military background, your business background, but I think that our listeners would love to hear about that.
Sure. Was an Air Force person for 20 years, did engineering and acquisition, then did operations, and then combat operations, and then worked for NATO for a while as the chief engineer for the NATO Air Fleet. Yeah. And then when I moved into academia, still kept that track going, did some work for the guy who was then Undersecretary Ash Carter, who became the secretary on product support for the future of DoD and things like that. So really pretty good. I will say probably the time in NATO is what prepared me the most for higher ed.
Wow, elaborate a little bit for us.
So it's interesting. We had aerospace firms from all over Europe that we would share the industrial benefit for overhaul the fleet. So I had that whole overhaul and parts and everything else together. So we had a group called IAMCO, which was essentially C-level execs from all the major European aerospace firms that would come together and were our steering group. Typical of Europe, they were located in Venice, which wasn't bad. We would, in the spring, we would have the steering group in Venice, and in the fall, we would have the one near Dornier that was outside of Munich. But that allowed us to come together with the principals who were involved in all this and figure out how to make things be a win-win, right? So how do I do something for a company and a senior national representative from, say, Turkey, by creating some goodwill with somebody from CASA and Spain, and how do we share back and forth to make that work? That was probably a lot more like higher ed than military operations.
Venice, Munich, Frisco.
That sounds pretty good. That kind of ties into what makes Frisco so unique.
I think what makes it unique is if you back up and you think about UNT. So UNT starts in 1890 with a group of people coming together and saying, we can see this coming industrial revolution, right? So you think about this. This is before the Model T Ford or airplanes, and somebody is getting together and saying, we need everybody to learn how to read, write, arithmetic, and how to get up at 7:30 in the morning. That's foreign, right? This is an agrarian society in the 1890s in Texas. People are getting up around when the sun is up.
Yeah, sure. A lot of farm work.
Yeah, and there's probably not a huge demand for everybody to know how to read and write, or everybody to know how to do arithmetic. And so these people get together above a hardware store and say, we need to make sure the next generation is prepared to be successful and take care of their families. Kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
And you can imagine somebody's going, no, we're fine. Current schools are fine.
Of course.
We don't need everybody to do that.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. and so they begin training teachers to teach people to do this and to teach people how to prepare for this next revolution that's coming. Then, UNT is one of the first 2 universities to voluntarily desegregate. 50 years later, we got the top jazz program in the country, right? So this
Love that.
kind of history, yeah, of course you do, Paul. this history of response and innovation. So then we come together at Hall Park, right? It's not exactly a hardware store, but it's close enough. And it's getting together with a group of industry, a fantastic city with great leadership in the mayor and the president of the Economic Development Corporation, with great partners like you mentioned.
I've never seen a partnership like this one. This is incredible.
And then committed alumni like Jim McNatt or Brent Ryan, and then the president and Dr. Cowley and Mr. Brown saying, we're going to do this part different. And we're going to start by going, what are the things that we do at the main campus that are project-based, that are applied, that are internships, that we are very, very good at? And how do we focus that at Frisco and begin to hear this next generation of reading, writing, and arithmetic? And I think we've talked about this idea of kind of literacies for the next economy.
Right.
Digital, creative, quantitative, and communication. And what we're finding is it's working. Industry loves it. They see us as being responsive. The folks at the main campus who are trying to maintain the verticals that allow them to be successful at the undergrad or grad with NSF funding, boy, they can stay and hammer that hard at the main campus. Other areas, they may have parts that wish to look at something slightly more applied. So one side might be doing heavy mechanical engineering at the main campus. Another one might start doing rapid prototyping with us as a new undergraduate degree or something like that.
Yeah, it
so I
feels
think
like
it starts
our
to
own
work.
Skunk Works kind of.
Yeah,
right.
It does feel a lot like, that's part of our background.
Yeah.
So it feels a lot like I'm working with Lockheed, Palmdale folks once
exactly.
again, right?
Yep.
Well, it was cool in the presentation that you made to the folks when the chancellor and I visited that you had some emerging fields, and I actually stole or borrowed from you a little bit, and that you had things like wearable technology and 3D printing and things of that nature that kids, I spoke at a high school and the kids loved the wearable technology, talking about their Apple Watches. It was a great relatable thing. But how did you guys pinpoint those emerging areas that you did spotlight for us when we talked to you? Yeah,
so I think what we did was we figured out part of this is digital, right? That's the new literacy of the future. Whatever you're doing, you have to do something digital. And then we began to look and go, what are the skill sets that industry wants a student to have? And then what are these enduring competencies? And so what we started to hear was there's this, we'll take the wearables, there's this vertical that is biology students that are going to go to grad school or going to go to med school. But then there's also this, how do I do humans and wearables or down the road embeddables or human performance and connect that to these new emerging market areas of wearables or all this nutraceuticals? What's that look like, right? Is that graduate degree? Is that an applied undergraduate degree? And so as we started to look at it, we had industry saying, I need students who can do physics of failure. Okay, we have degrees that teach us how to create engineered systems. We have degrees that teach us how to optimize operations management, but we don't have degrees that really teach us how to run systems and then understand how it fails and then how to recover it. So that's very applied, right? And so it's how do I take computer science, but then make it highly applied, maybe cyber or cyber forensics in these other things? So that caused us to step back and go, what are these list of things people are talking about that maybe are not a degree, but if I gathered 4 or 5 of them together, might be a degree? Rapid prototyping, advanced manufacturing, 3D printing, digital manufacturing, that may come together.
So 21st century, right?
Yeah, right. And then how do you do it in an efficient way so that the students get a lot out of it rapidly? The other side of it is this idea of work, that the students work with industry. They work on projects. So we talk about flipped classrooms where students read the textbook outside of the classroom. Maybe what we're talking about is students go and get some sort of certification for cyber that is part of a class, and then they're applying 3 or 4 different of these techniques to work on a project with an industry partner.
Well, and I know you guys have listened to your industry partners a lot, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But before we take a break, I had one more question for Alan. Alan, I thought I saw you passing through the board meeting when Bob Brown presented the first master plan to the regents, and that had to be just an amazing thing to see, given, we talked about you wrote the paper, but to see renderings of what this place is going to look like, holy cow, that had to be a special moment.
Well, and you don't get to see this many times in the life of people in higher education. You've got wonderful partners. You've got the donation of the land that comes to us, and the ability to build a new city for higher education, and where it serves all kinds of students. And it certainly exceeds anything I had in mind when I wrote the paper.
Well, that's exciting, and I can tell you it really was a highlight of the board meeting for all of us to get to see that. Well, we'll dive a little bit deeper into UNT at Frisco in just a minute. You're listening to UNT World's Bridging Gaps podcast. We'll be right back.
The University of North Texas System is the only university system based in Dallas-Fort Worth, the nation's #1 job market. Our robust system is focused on providing work-ready graduates to our booming region while uplifting the lives of our students through education. Between our 3 institutions, the UNT system awards more than 9,000 degrees each year, including the largest number of master's and doctoral degrees in the DFW region. To learn more, visit us at untsystem.edu.
Welcome back to UNT World's Bridging Gaps podcast with Paul Corliss and Lisa Rowe. We're here with Dr. Wesley Randall and Dr. Alan Clark of UNT, and we're talking UNT at Frisco, and we were talking a little bit off the air about really how unique this arrangement is that you have with the city of Frisco, that you have with the business community, the Chamber of Commerce. How did all that come together, guys, where you have everybody in the boat sort of rowing in the same direction?
Yeah, it's amazing. So it started with the president, the provost, Mr. Brown, folks from the UNT board getting together around the idea of where do we grow in the future and where does it make sense for us to be very, very responsive. And so we had in the city of Frisco a group of partners who, as everybody knows, Frisco is the #1 fastest growing city in America, above 50,000 people, and McKinney is the 2nd fastest.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And these people are thinking about, the road Preston, 20 years ago, the city paid for the engineering if TxDOT would make that road far wider than it should be. That's the road where Panther Creek and the new campus will go.
Right.
So someone in the 90s made that road, and if you go down it, you go, why is this such a wide road? They could not have been thinking about the Brinkman Ranch and this being UNT, but it's that kind of planning.
Do we know a singular visionary that has?
Yeah, there is. There's a fellow who, I forgot his name. He is a UNT alum who was part of their economic development and city management. Wow. Yeah. We should dig that one back up.
Deserves a high five.
Yeah, and they have been very prophetic since the first day. And if you look at what they have going on, it's a city that's trying to attract all sorts of big industry partners to this part of the world. Good news for us is people want to be here. It's very, very diverse, It's folks that are kind of hungry in companies that are upstarts or disruptive. It makes sense for our students, right? Their city is highly diverse. We're highly diverse. Their city has a bunch of folks who are first generation that are being successful in giving back. We got a bunch of students that are first successful and who are first generation and who are going to be successful and give back. So it just makes sense, and they're committed. And I think you saw when you all came down to us, heck, that was the easiest presentation I've ever done. I'm not typically crazy about this kind of stuff. I'd rather be the guy in the background. We had 40-something industry folks show up at a corporate level wanting to tell you thank you for what we're doing in Frisco. It's delightful.
It was delightful. It really was. Everybody was, and why this partnership was so important to them. And every single person could talk about why it matters. So, and just genuine about it.
Genuine.
So it was pretty exciting. I also got to see Inspire Park while I was there. So how does that fit in? Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so that one's pretty interesting. So Inspire Park was the city's tech incubator. And as part of the land deal, we ended up acquiring Inspire Park. I think it made sense because it's always nice when you've got some form of an alliance where the goals are absolutely congruent. So when it comes down to it, the city's goal and the president of the Economic Development Corporation, his goal is to build big buildings with companies that pay good salaries. Fantastic. We want to create degrees or bring forward degrees that educate students to take good jobs in big buildings with wonderful salaries.
Right.
So we are absolutely congruent.
Match made in heaven.
And I just was talking to Mr. Patterson 2 days ago about some stuff we're working on. I said, Ron, it is so enjoyable that I know if I'm in a meeting making decisions on what is the number one priority for our students, I'm making decisions that are automatically congruent with his number one priority, right?
Absolutely.
It's beautiful. So we took over this building. Alan led a lot of, it's an amazing building. It's about 8 years old. It needed a bunch of tech refresh and some infrastructure in order for us to make it something that when companies come in, it feels like tech.
Right.
And to be honest, nothing feels more like tech than bright, shiny undergraduate students with lab coats and goggles.
No doubt about it.
So job one was to put a
like
lab.
the Minions in that movie, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. That's a great visual. Absolutely. That's perfect. That's good.
Is there a ceiling for Frisco's growth and development? Because you figure at some point the bubble's got to burst. I mean, I can remember I started as a newspaper writer at the Denton Record Chronicle in 1998, and
wow.
we would put Frisco's scores in the paper, and the biggest thing was that we would get calls about their offensive mascot name. It had nothing to do with how good their teams were, and now they've got 3 or 4 high schools. They've got the Dallas Cowboys there. They've got the PGA moving there, and all this development. Of course, UNT is leading education, and Collin College. I mean, where is the ceiling?
So yeah, I think what's interesting is as part of the deal for the land, we did a bunch of modeling of the demographics of Frisco, and that's an area that we're good at. So there's a fellow, David Nowicki, who he and I used to work together, and we used our assets in Austin that do work for TxDOT and toll roads. So we did a very, very good job of modeling that out. Another guy who was one of my faculty members who the chancellor knows, Jonathan Fite, helped us. So in the process of digging through and doing that due diligence, when we got done, the Frisco Economic Development Corporation came back and said, we'd like you to help us with our economic development plan going forward. And so we've been doing that. So Jonathan Fite has been helping. They have built out 60%. They are now very, very deliberate about the next 40%. Mm-hmm. So any big city is trying to give economic incentives. Now they're incredibly focused on which firms they are going after, the kind of firms, the kind of work they're going after, what are the emerging areas of kind of economic growth that work for them. And
is
we're
there
helping
residential
do that.
growth ahead too?
Yes, and I think you're starting to see some of the higher density single family stuff that you see in and around Dallas. I think you're now going to start seeing a little bit more of the mixed residential.
Okay.
I believe Mr. Hall recently got a very successful rezoning in and around Hall Park to bring in some mixed residential, which makes a whole lot of sense. That's a great area. Frisco's motto was live, work, play. And we've added, and Ron Patterson is kindly stolen, live, work, play, educate.
Love it.
And so we want to continue to be that engine to helping them to be futurist, because they can then know which companies to go after, and we can know what degrees to build for them and start attracting people.
So what is that future? What are the future jobs? What do you see changing?
Yeah, it's interesting. So what we do hear about, and we've talked about this, is one way that we've kind of looked at it is we've got a great relationship in my discipline's logistics with the folks at Alliance Texas. I know, Chancellor,
Yeah,
you've had an
exactly.
opportunity
Been
to go
out
out
there,
there. And ironically, that is the Hillwood Corporation that's also making a big investment around a star called Frisco Station.
It's all connected, huh?
It is all connected. But at Alliance, we know they've got 2 Class 1 railroads, they've got heavy lift, they got economic free trade zones. So they can bring stuff in from the West Coast on huge trains, they can break it down, and they can fly it out of the country like it was never here, or they can delay it in bonded warehouses. So that means Alliance can do heavy, low cost per cube, low cost per kilogram kinds of work. They've got financial, big IT backbones. That's not Frisco, right? Frisco is very expensive. There are highways. There's no heavy rail in and out. So whatever we do at Frisco has got to be high cost per cube. Nothing is more high cost per cube than space. It's got to be high intellectual content, so high education, or high service or service innovation. And so that's what's causing us to look deeply at, we talked before about these 4 literacies. What is the backbone? And it's probably digital is the backbone of all of this.
Give us those 4 literacies again, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, and so what we think, kind of like the reading, writing, and arithmetic, it's something around digital, maybe computer science. If I go to the left and I say it's kind of engineering, maybe in the middle, it's more digital, how to do e-commerce, how to do digital kinds of things. It's then creativity. How do we use, UNT has 111 Grammy Award winners. Wow, that's part of our DNA. Well, as I'm in Frisco, that creativity may not be a new Grammy Award winning song, but it might be some idea that increases benefit or decreases cost.
Sure.
So we're trying to teach students how to think that way. If I'm going to make changes, I got to know I made a change. So tied to that then is being able to quantify a change. How do I measure a change? Then tied to that, lastly, is this idea of communication, storytelling. How do I communicate the need for healthcare in an underserved neighborhood? Or how do I communicate the fact we've got some new value proposition, some new app, or some new corporation, and they've got something that'll improve lives or productivity or social responsibility.
And you're fine-tuning your approach to these
Yes.
These
literacies.
Excuse me. You're fine-tuning that by working with the business community.
Yeah.
Who are your partners in the business community right now that you can speak about?
Wow, we've got quite a few of them. So the Cowboys are an amazing partner. They are clearly pretty amazing brand. We are proud to be partnered with them. That has done an amazing thing for us to open up doors. It's also allowed us to get into a position to approach sports as a business enterprise. And so what we're able to do there is to look at it not necessarily as an arena, but a massive infrastructure. And then how do you generate return on assets? And what's great is when we teach students that way, sure, they can go work for the Cowboys, but they could go work for someone who's running a port, or they could go work for Hillwood, who's building big arenas. Ticketing and sports events are the same as revenue management for American Airlines, right? This is a seat at a sporting event that the minute the game starts, that's worth nothing. Same like an airline. So what we're trying to do is embed these core business principles into these kinds of degrees that are still highly valuable to folks like the Cowboys or the PGA. Where do we help the PGA grow? Some of our staff went out to just tell the PGA folks in Orlando, here's the educational offerings we have. PGA's got amazing infrastructure. How do we help them? Where do we go with that in the future? At the other end of the spectrum, we've got little upstart firms that have moved into Inspire Park. There's a company, Voodoo Robotics, that is making cool little robotics that could work for pharmaceuticals or cool pick-to-push stuff. They're working with our students. We've got another successful upstart, IoT America, that's as part of the lease with us. They're also hiring 10 interns a year. They're working on student projects. So it's pretty cool, but we've got partners from across the board. Kerrigan, Baylor Scott and White, HCL, the Indian consulting firm, is talking to us about new degrees in cyber that build a different version of computer science. Scottish Rite, Gearbox, we're talking to them. We started talking to them about, do they need coders? And they're actually part of the reason we started this whole adventure. They said, no, we need folks that can build digital worlds, but know how to work with students that are creative.
Sure.
And then we need students who are creative, who know how to work with students that are able to build digital worlds quantitatively. Like, okay, we can figure that out, right? We can make sure all the computer science students are exposed to 15 hours of creative, and all the creatives are exposed to 15 hours of computer science. And that's, Alan is a math whiz. And that's part of what Alan has been loaned to us to do, is figure out the technology and then figure out how do we come up with new ways to teach some of these hardcore skills in a way that are more accessible to the students.
No, that makes sense. Alan, is that work something you ever envisioned yourself doing? I mean, this is all such new, modern stuff happening. It's really fascinating for me as an onlooker.
Well, you go back to being in the classroom 25 years ago, and you just taught from the book. And I struggled with that. I struggled with that. I did it for 5 years and struggled with that. And the idea of project-based learning has just fascinated me for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And to get this opportunity where we can bring projects in and you teach something like inventory control, but in the end you're teaching calculus, but they don't know it, right? And the most frustrating thing to me as a math instructor is somebody come up and say, well, I'm not good at math. Well, that's not because of you, that's because of the way it was taught. And so this idea of project-based learning is just, it's fascinating to me. Dean Randall has given me a stack of books. I've just received about 5 different books in the last week on this, and getting to spend time to look at ways that we can put math at the root of everything we do, but not make it something that runs a student in the other direction.
Well, it's kind of like, Lisa, when you talk to young girls about careers in STEM, I think it's the same thing, taking away that intimidation factor.
Oh, yeah.
It humanizes it when you have a real application.
Really using it makes a big difference for all students, but I've noticed especially girl students, right? It really makes a big difference.
Yeah, it can be intimidating. What do the students at UNT Frisco look like? Are they different than UNT Denton students? Because our institutions all have their own persona, right? And this is a subset of UNT. It's a branch campus, but are your students different?
It's interesting. So I think they look much like our students in terms of diversity. We also know this is a great area where we are building partnerships with the community college. So our ability to create degrees that are seamless. And there's a lot of talk at the legislature about field of study, et cetera. So we had these conversations. My background in My folks is business folks, supply chain folks. And we know the answer to complexity is not complexity, it's simplicity.
That's true.
And so what we tried to do was turn around and understand deeply what is the disruption between the community colleges and the four-year universities. What it boils down to is there's 42 hours in the Texas core. Talk about remarkably unprepared for a job. I didn't know that a year ago. Right. I mainly dealt with PhD students and research and had my own little world. I knew none of this. I barely taught at the undergrad. So this is all new. With that, a student who gets an associate's degree can get 18 hours of something else. Okay. In a perfect world, that student will take the field of study for business so that when they get to the UNT, they're ready and they've taken prerequisites. Well, the community colleges can't force students to be advised.
Sure.
I mean, even in business, we have a hard time getting students to pay attention to what they should take. So often these students show up having taken other courses that are not part of the field of study, which then causes a barrier for them to come into the upper division, right? They've got to go back and take prereqs. Yeah. So in some cases, it makes sense. In a heavy quant kind of a degree, students are going to have to go back and take the prereqs if they didn't or they got the field of study wrong. In other cases, particularly if we're trying to create new applied stuff, possibly we can reinvent how we look at the degree, and instead of leaving 18 hours left as electives in the senior year, we just take all 60 hours in the degree and embed it all, everything that could be a prereq. And then we tell the student, you can come to this degree. There are no prereqs. Nobody is sending you back to take more courses, but you're going to have to work hard. We're going to set up tutoring. We're going to be there to help you, but you got to commit to doing the work to get through this degree as fast as you can, and we won't make you do the prereqs. And so I think there's ways we can build that and teach that, like Alan is talking about, because part of it is the amount of degrees. You and I were talking about drumming. I'm a horrendous drummer, and I'm trying to learn.
I'm not very good either.
Yeah, but that's a time-based thing for me, right? I could go back and take the prereqs. I'm going to need 3 or 4 years. Right. So some of these things the students will need to get all the way through differential equation. So there's some time that they need. There is good reasons to have prereqs and those students to be focused as sophomores. Some of these new things we're trying to do, we think we can do it in 2 years of the upper division. And then we can bring in the project basis. And so now when the chancellor's out or President Smotrisk is out and a community college person goes, hey, we really want to remove barriers, it's universal. I don't care if it's dual credit. I don't care if it's 2+2 degrees. If we have these applied degrees that give these work-ready skills that Alan is talking about, you can say, yeah, we're ready to go. We've got 7 or 8 degrees that are ready to go that any kid with an associate degree can transfer right into. So we built the first of those in business, and we're now working with the college to build some more.
Clearly, we've got a good relationship with the community college and
Yes,
with
ma'am.
the high school because both
Yeah.
Frisco ISD and the Collin College were at the event where I came to
Yeah.
tour. So they're part of the partnership. So we want to talk about that.
Yeah, they're fantastic. The first meeting I went to was something about the Dell company and these seamless pathways. And I just happened to sit down at the table with a fellow who was the associate provost for Collin. And I just hit it off. I mean, it was pure luck. And so as people were talking about stuff, he didn't mind just answering question after question because I had these biases, to be honest, about what's going on at the community college. And he just, without getting flustered, he's a literature kind of guy. He looks beard and looks like a literature kind of guy, looks just like he stepped out of a Dickens novel. Just a wonderful man also, and just gave us some great advice on how to move forward. And that partnership has just deepened between us, his staff, my staff. I've got a lady we hired who was at the community colleges who's doing an excellent job, Peggy Shattuck. And it's helped us identify that you asked about the market difference. So we know clearly what our market is. we've got this channel to the transfer student.
Sure.
And what's great about that is we know that we are underrepresented in Collin, meaning we want more students from Collin to go to the UNT enterprise, either at the main campus or at Hall Park. We're below where we are compared to the other big counties in that area. So we've got this value proposition where if somebody wants to go to a four-year college and be go into sports and be part of acting clubs or other clubs, we want to be there at Hall Park to help them get enrolled to the main campus. And we've seen that. This last spring, we did a lot of different efforts. We're up 94% in transfer students, and we're up 6% in transfer students. 94% came from Collin.
What's our enrollment overall in Frisco?
So we're about at, we call it unduplicated. We're about 500 students that are purely unduplicated, and we're about 1,500 students that are individual. And we're working through the best way to count those students and figure out how do we count them going forward. In some cases, we do have to send them back for a lab. Does that count or not? But increasingly, it's transfer students that are coming right into the upper division, these seamless degrees. And then we've got, I think Al and I counted them up on the way down here. We've got 15 or 16 undergraduate degrees and everything from business to consumer experience management that started last fall. And then another 8 or 9 master's degrees, and then 2 doctoral degrees that are going to be up and running or are running. We know we have this adult learner population. One of these days you need to get Adam Fine, our digital VP for digital. He's awesome.
Absolutely.
He is awesome.
Yes. My folks love him. When he sat down with us, he said the 2 worst words in higher ed are some college. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, people who have to say they have some college. And so Adam is on a mission to eradicate some college. Well, we are there to do it with him. We've got this Bachelor of Arts and Sciences degree that we can bring workforce credit in. And so we know this adult learner is another population for us. The Cinemark deal that you've heard about is us going out and being able to work with a company to take folks who've got some college and get them through the undergraduate degree without having to send them back. And we can actually get them into a master's degree faster than we could send them back. And then it also, if you're 35, 36, 37, going back to get your undergraduate degree done, man, it's humbling if somebody's sending you back to redo stuff. If we can send them forward and we can treat their workforce credit, which is what the Texas legislator built with this degree, it allows us to do some of the core during the upper division time, and then give them a concentration in, say, 8 classes of business.
Right.
Awesome. We can then send them up to get a master's in advanced data analytics quicker than we could send them back, right? And people feel much better about it, and it just makes a heck of a lot of sense.
You're really keeping the student in mind.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. We know there's the graduate stuff that we want to build up on. We're exploring doing an executive kind of PhD in information science, starting that there in the fall. We get a lot of folks asking us about that. We've got the EDD, our College of Education is best in the state.
Wow, great.
They're fantastic. They've hundreds, if not thousands of folks in the state of Texas have masters and doctorates from our College of Education. Some districts, 30, 40, 50% of the teachers are from our College of Education. So huge demand there. The data and data analytics significantly demand there.
What's the student life going to be like once the campus develops? Is there going to be a separate student life in Frisco for the student that exclusively goes there, or is it more of an industry type?
I think it's probably more than an industry type experience. So as we talked about it, what we don't want to do is overly replicate Denton, right? So I make the trip 2 or 3 times a week. It is about a 35 to 40 minute drive. It is not bad. I have got a massive Tier 1 comprehensive university with beautiful facilities in Denton. And we have got amazing colleges, amazing degrees, amazing faculty. If that is for you, and you want that, then that's there in Denton. And it's an amazing university town. Conversely, we see what UNT or UTD has done, right? They've done a great job of being niche in some areas and having a good reputation.
Sure.
Those students are not interested in a big campus, right? They're interested in some niche areas of high quality. Well, what we can afford to do is, I've got a comprehensive university right behind me. As there is a need to do something, I can bring part of that down, and we can educate primarily either in these cohort degrees at the undergraduate or in the upper division in the graduate with students who are probably working, or we're going to do co-ops, etc. So I can see us building out to 25,000 students in the future. I think there will be some residential elements, and it will look more like the Denton campus 15, 20 years from now. I don't think that's the requirement anytime soon. We'll make sure that we've got industry partners that satisfy needs. We've got facilities or relationships to satisfy student needs outside of the classroom, but it'll be really about this partnership-based education and just hitting these job-ready work skills.
Is there anybody else in the country doing anything like this?
We try to stay ahead. So there are niches. If you look at some of the stuff at Cornell, it's kind of fascinating. So what we know is we're really focusing on applied at Frisco. So my background is logistics. In the 70s and 80s, there was a guy named Don Bowersox at Michigan State and another guy named Doug Lambert at Ohio State who began logistics and supply chain as a discipline. They were considered kind of grubby disciplines amongst the business school faculty. Now, those two colleges are the powerhouse for logistics and supply chain. I think that's some of what we're doing here. But then we bring in business so we can keep it current and keep it updated. It's really a
unique set of resources you have access to.
Yeah, so it's essentially what Michigan State and Ohio State did. If you think back 100 years ago, there's a guy, Art Shaw at Harvard, medicine, law, and business, grubby little applied degrees, right? And they just leaned into applied degrees and, they got rewarded for it. I think this becomes, Frisco becomes part of this one part of the market sensing organization for UNT Denton, right? There's still other parts with engineering and NSF and other industry partners, but this becomes very focused on sensing the market, collaborating on new degrees, understanding these emerging channels with transfer students, adult learners, graduate students, and then that partnership back to the main campus to build that out.
Yeah, you can't see Lisa and I because it's an audio podcast. We're just nodding our heads throughout this conversation.
That's true. Can't they hear the nod?
Here's what I hear in my head is my wife going, "Quit talking so much." I'm not crazy about these things.
This is really fascinating. And it falls really right in line, Lisa, with what we do when you're going out and talking to civic groups and to chambers of commerce and things like that. It falls right in line with workforce development that you talk about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What's happening in Frisco and what we're doing there is so tied into what I hear from every industry partner. Everybody are those folks that aren't even partners yet. What they need. So I mean, we're on the right track. There's no doubt about it.
I think so. And it's just I would tell my wife, "Sweetie, I'm passionate about this, so I wouldn't do
Absolutely.
it." I was not looking to be the dean of anything. This is something I believe in. It makes sense. I think we're going to make a difference for our student. I think it makes sense for the university. I said earlier, the president, the provost, Mr. Brown, Mr. Goodman, Dr. With have been amazing partners, giving us the resources, and it's allowing us to also be a venue for faculty who want to try to do something a little different to come out and do it without freaking out the main campus, right? Yeah. What we do at the main campus is unbelievably
it's like
successful.
Your safe place to be different, right?
But I don't, if I want to create Lockheed Skunk Works, we talked about that earlier, I don't need if I was going to say General Dynamics, it's now Lockheed. The Lockheed plant in Fort Worth trying to innovate like crazy. No, they need to produce Joint Strike Fighters, and they need to produce F-16s, and they need to do what they do very, very well. I don't want to have everybody innovating. It's inefficient and it's frustrating. So what the president, Mr. Brown, and the provost vision for this makes a lot of sense. There are folks at UNT who are delighted to come out and try to innovate with us. Other folks are more along the lines of, when you get the bugs worked out, give us a heads up.
Right?
Yeah, we'll put it back in. So I think it works out really well, because you hear people go, oh gosh, higher ed doesn't innovate.
They haven't visited us.
Yeah, right. I think this is how we innovate.
No, it's so exciting and fun to see something so truly modern happening just right here in our North Texas region. Well, one question I'm going to ask each of you, Lisa, you included, that we'll close with, and I'll start, Dr. Clark, with you. As far as the future, what excites you most about UNT at Frisco?
I've never seen in 25 years the partnership that has come together, right? When they were doing the design and work in the development for the new campus, everybody was around the table and everybody's voice was heard and considered. And when you go into Hall Park and you see all the staff working together, you would not know they have different lines. They're all there to support the student. And so the integration and the discussion of what does the student need is what is really, really just exciting to me as to where we're going. And every time we start the conversations, and Dean Randall has kind of embedded this, what does the student need? And I think as long as we keep that at the forefront, we can't go wrong with this.
Absolutely. Chancellor, I'll let Dean Randall close with his answer, so I'll put you on the spot. What are you most excited about for the future at UNT at Frisco?
I'm excited because I'm excited with the partnerships and the really leaning forward and doing something different and something that's needed by the community. That's why the partners are supporting us and want us there, because we're willing to listen and change what we're doing to provide what they need so that they can actually be the leaders of the future in businesses, right? So we're making them successful with their businesses, and we're making the students successful by providing them the jobs of the future.
Right, so, what a novel concept to listen to what the needs are, right? Rather than telling the business community what they need.
Exactly.
Okay, let's close with the Dean. Dean Randall, what's most exciting to you?
So it's interesting. So I'll joke sometimes if I'm asked to speak to somebody, and I'll ask who's from UNT, who's from SMU or TCU. And one of the things that I like about what we're doing is we're North Texas. TCU and SMU are not North Texas. We're North Texas. So I think what I like most about what we're doing in Frisco is it is highlighting North Texas. So it is not so much what my staff or what Alan is doing at Frisco. It's causing us to see the way the city and others look at UNT Frisco and UNT Denton, and see it in a way I don't think we see ourselves sometimes, right? That it is this amazing enterprise of creativity, of tier one research, of storytelling and journalism. And I just get to take part of that down to Frisco to do what we're doing, but it's just a nest of everything that's right in Denton. So I think, to answer your question, is that this whole adventure at Frisco makes me even more proud of what we're doing in Denton, right?
It really is exciting. Well, thank you guys both so much for coming and joining us today. Our special guests, Dr. Wesley Randall, Dr. Alan Clark with UNT. And of course, Chancellor, thanks for being with me today and doing a podcast. We'll do it.
Always delighted.
It's always a good time, isn't it? We'll do it again next month. This podcast is brought to you by the UNT system. For Lisa Rowe, I'm Paul Corliss. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you next month on the Bridging Gaps podcast.
Thank you for listening to the UNT World's Bridging Gaps podcast. You can stream or download our podcast on iTunes, Speaker, or SoundCloud. You can also visit us online at untsystem.edu/podcast. This has been a University of North Texas System production. Together we